You have been told your entire life that heaven is the reward. Not just a reward, the reward. The whole point of everything. The reason you follow the rules. The reason you go to church on Sunday mornings when you would rather be somewhere else. The reason you deny yourself things that feel completely harmless. The reason you bite your tongue and bow your head and live the way you were told to live. The reason you tell yourself that the suffering is temporary, that the hard parts are building towards something, that it all makes sense in the end because there is something waiting on the other side that makes every sacrifice worth it. That is the promise. That is what has been sold to billions of people across thousands of years, and it is one of the most successful promises ever made, because it is completely unfalsifiable during the lifetime of the person being asked to live by it. You cannot check, you cannot verify, you cannot come back and report on whether the destination was worth the cost of the journey. You simply believe and live accordingly, and die and find out, or do not find out, depending on what turns out to be true. And in all those years of being told about heaven, in all the sermons and the Sunday school classes and the funerals where someone stood at a podium and said they're in a better place now, in all of that, nobody ever asked you to sit down and actually look at the specific content of what is being promised. Not the feeling of it, not the comfort of it, not the emotional warmth that the concept produces when you are grieving or afraid or lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering what happens when you die. The actual content, what heaven is, what happens there, what you will be doing, for how long, under what conditions, and whether any of it, when examined honestly without the music and the candlelight and the grief, actually sounds like something a reasonable person would choose. This video is going to do that examination. Not to attack your faith, not to make you feel foolish for believing, not to take something away from you without offering anything in return, but because the questions are real and they deserve to be asked. Because if heaven is real, if it is the destination that justifies everything you have given up to get there, then it should be able to survive being looked at directly. Good things survive scrutiny. True things survive scrutiny, and if the most important promise ever made to you cannot survive honest questions, then the problem is not the questions. So, let us look at what is actually being promised. The Bible is more specific about heaven than most people realize. Most people encounter heaven through sermons that are designed to produce comfort rather than through the actual text that contains the description. The two experiences are very different. The sermon gives you the warmth, the text gives you the content, and the content raises questions the sermon never addresses. Revelation 21, verse 4. God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. 4 things explicitly removed: tears, death, mourning, pain. Not reduced, not managed, not present in smaller amounts, completely gone. This is a promise about the structure of the place, about what the environment of heaven actually contains and does not contain. Revelation 4 and 5. 4 living creatures around the throne of God, each with 6 wings, covered with eyes, who do not rest day nor night. What are they doing? They're saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." They're not resting, they're not doing other things. They're saying this day and night, without stopping, without rest. 24 elders are falling before the throne, laying their crowns down, worshiping, over and over. This is not described as one moment, it is described as a continuous state. The activity of heaven is worship, specifically and repeatedly and without end. John chapter 14, verse 2. In my Father's house are many rooms, mansions in some translations. The point is that there are different spaces, different levels, not everyone in the same place. Matthew chapter 6, verse 20. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. You store up treasures, which means treasures vary between people. Some have more, some have less. The earthly life determines the heavenly position. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 42 through 44. The body that is sown is perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. A new body, not the one you currently have, something transformed, something that has been changed into a different kind of thing. This is what is actually being promised. Read it without the warmth. Read it as content, as the description of a place you are being asked to trade your actual life for, and then ask the questions that the sermons never ask. Problem 1. Boredom. The problem everyone felt as a child and got told to stop feeling. When most children first hear about heaven and get past the fluffy clouds version and hear the actual description, the description that involves worship and praise and the presence of God forever, they feel something uncomfortable. Something they quickly learn not to say out loud, because saying it out loud makes the adults in the room go quiet in a specific way that tells you the thought was wrong. They feel bored just thinking about it. Not because they are spiritually immature, not because they do not understand the glory of God, because they are being honest. Because the description, when heard without the emotional scaffolding that adults have built around it over decades of believing, sounds like the most monotonous thing anyone has ever described. And the grown-up defense is always the same. You do not understand. In the presence of God, it will not feel like boredom. The experience will be so overwhelming, so transcendent, so beyond anything you have ever felt on earth that the concept of boredom will simply not apply. You will be so filled with God's presence that you will not want anything else. You will not be capable of wanting anything else. We will come back to the second half of that defense because it creates its own enormous problem. But let us first deal with the first half, the idea that the experience will be so good that boredom will not occur. Think about the best experience you have ever had, the most overwhelming moment of beauty or joy or connection or transcendence you have ever felt. Now imagine experiencing that exact moment again, right now, and again tomorrow, and again the day after, and again every single day for a year. Is it still the most overwhelming moment of beauty or joy or connection or transcendence by day 365? Or has it become something familiar, something that no longer produces the response it once did because your brain has adjusted to it? Of course it is adjusted. That is what brains do. It is not a character flaw, it is the mechanism by which human beings continue to function. The brain habituates to everything. The traffic outside your window that kept you awake the first week in a new apartment becomes inaudible within a month. The song that made you pull over and turn up the volume the first time you heard it becomes background noise after enough plays. The relationship that felt electric at the beginning becomes comfortable, and then routine, and then something that requires active maintenance to keep feeling alive. This is not failure, it is biology. It is the brain doing its job of distinguishing what is new and potentially important from what is familiar and can be processed automatically. And heaven is not a year. Heaven is not 100 years. Heaven is not 1,000,000 years. Heaven is forever, infinite. And infinity is not a very big number. That is the crucial misunderstanding. People hear forever and imagine a very long time, a time so long it becomes impossible to visualize. But infinity is not a long time. Infinity is a different kind of thing entirely. It has no end, not eventually, not after a number so large it breaks the calculator. Never. The end never comes. By the time you have been in heaven for longer than every human being who has ever lived has been alive put together, multiplied by itself 1,000,000,000,000 times, you will still be at the absolute beginning of forever. Not 1% of the way through, not 1,000,000th of a percent, not any measurable fraction. The beginning, with all of eternity unchanged ahead of you. There is no version of any experience that survives this. Not the presence of God, not the most transcendent feeling imaginable, not anything. Because the brain that would experience the transcendence is a brain that habituates, and the time available for the habituation is infinite. The transcendence will become the background noise. It always does. The only question is when, and in eternity, the when is irrelevant because there is nothing after it. Now think about the second half of the defense, that you will not want anything else because God's presence will restructure your desires. You will be so full of God that the capacity for boredom will not exist in you. You will want exactly what you have, forever. Hold that thought, because that is not a solution to the problem of boredom. That is a description of a much more serious problem, a problem that gets its own section, coming right now. Problem 2. You cannot leave. And the reason why is worse than the fact. Can you leave heaven? Not can you sin there, not can you be sad there. Can you, after experiencing the same worship for 1 billion years, simply choose to stop, to opt out, to say, I've had enough of this specific arrangement and I would like to not continue? Can you make that choice? No, you cannot. But the reason you cannot is more disturbing than the inability itself. You cannot leave not because a door is locked or because God will stop you. You cannot leave because God will have changed what you want. He will have altered your desires so completely that the desire to leave will not arise in you. Your will be aligned with His, perfectly, permanently. The part of you that might want something different will have been removed, not suppressed, not overridden, removed. You will not experience the desire to leave because the capacity to produce that desire will no longer be part of you. Think about what is being said here. God will change your wants. He will alter what you desire. He will take the interior life that currently produces questions and doubts and the capacity to imagine alternatives, and He will transform it into something that does not produce those things. And the result will be a being that is perfectly content with its situation because it has been specifically engineered to be content with its situation. This being will be happy, genuinely happy in the sense that it will not experience unhappiness. But the happiness will not be chosen. It will be installed. The contentment will not be earned or arrived at through genuine experience. It will be built into the being the way a thermostat is built to maintain a specific temperature. The thermostat is always at the right temperature. It is not happy about the temperature. It does not experience the temperature. It simply is set to produce a specific output. And the being in heaven is set to produce worship and contentment and nothing that contradicts those outputs. The standard theological defense of this is that it is not slavery because you will enjoy it, because you will want to be there, because the experience will be genuinely positive from the inside. But this defense is doing something very strange. It is arguing that the process by which your desires were restructured is irrelevant because the result of the restructuring is that you don't mind. That consent does not matter as long as the outcome is positive. That as long as you are happy, it does not matter whether you chose the happiness or whether the happiness was chosen for you by someone else who then removed your capacity to prefer anything different. Imagine a government that chemically altered its citizens to love their lives exactly as they were. No dissatisfaction, no desire for change, perfect contentment with whatever arrangement they were placed in, and every citizen reported being completely happy. Would you call that a good government? Or would you call it the most complete form of control ever achieved because it had removed even the awareness that control was occurring, because it had made the controlled incapable of recognizing the control? Heaven, as described, is that government, and God is the one running it, and you are being told this is the reward. Problem 3. Free will, the argument that destroys itself. This is the problem that should end every conversation about the justice of God and somehow never does. Not because the answer is good, because most people have never put the two halves of the argument next to each other at the same time. Ask any Christian why God allows suffering, why children get cancer, why innocent people are tortured, why history is full of atrocities committed by human beings against other human beings while an all-powerful, all-knowing God watched and did not intervene. Why, if God is good and God is powerful, any of this is allowed to happen? The answer is almost always free will. God could not simply make people good. Goodness that is not chosen is not real goodness. Love that is not freely given is not real love. God wanted genuine relationship with genuine beings who genuinely chose Him, and for that to be possible, the beings had to have real freedom, the freedom to choose wrong, the freedom to do harm, the freedom to reject God entirely. Without that freedom, the whole project of creation is meaningless. Without that freedom, love becomes programming, and God did not want programmed love, He wanted chosen love. This argument is used to justify every terrible thing in human history: the Holocaust, slavery, child abuse, disease, famine. Every atrocity is ultimately explained by pointing at free will and saying God could not remove it without destroying something more important than the suffering it enables. Free will is the price. The price is worth it. The love that is possible because of free will outweighs the suffering that is possible because of free will. You have heard this argument so many times it probably sounds reasonable to you at this point. So let us take it seriously and then look at heaven. In heaven, there is no sin. Revelation is explicit. No death, no mourning, no crying, no pain. Every inhabitant of heaven is perfectly moral at all times. Every thought is good. Every action is good. Every desire is good, without exception, forever. But a being that is perfectly moral at all times without exception does not have free will. This is not a philosophical technicality. This is what free will means. Free will means the genuine ability to choose either option. A being that cannot sin is not choosing not to sin. It has no capacity for the other option. It is not exercising freedom. It is not making a moral choice. It is producing a moral output the same way a calculator produces a correct answer. The calculator does not choose the right answer. It was designed to produce it. The being in heaven does not choose goodness. It was transformed to produce it. Now put both halves of the argument together. God could not give us a world without suffering because it would remove free will. Free will is so important, so essential, so non-negotiable that it is worth every atrocity in human history, every war, every genocide, every child who has ever died in pain, every person who has ever been destroyed by another person. All of it was the necessary price of free will. But in heaven, free will is gone, and it is not a tragedy, it is the point. The destination is a place where free will does not exist, where every being is perfectly good by design rather than by choice, where the thing that supposedly justified all the horror of human history is simply removed, because apparently now it is no longer necessary. Which means God could have started here. He could have created beings without the capacity for evil from the very beginning. Heaven proves the arrangement is possible. He chose instead to run the entire history of human suffering first and then arrive at the same destination he could have started at. And when you ask why, the answer is free will, the free will that is about to be permanently removed. The argument doesn't just fail, it collapses into itself and takes the entire theological structure with it. Problem 4. You cannot grow, you cannot learn, you cannot become anything. Think about the last time you felt genuinely proud of yourself. Not because someone gave you something or told you that you did well, because you did something you were not sure you could do. You pushed through something difficult. You got better at something through effort and failure and trying again. You became something you were not before. Maybe you ran a distance you had never run before and your legs were screaming for you to stop and you did not stop. Maybe you finally said something difficult that needed to be said and it cost you something and you said it anyway. Maybe you learned how to do something that had defeated you before. Maybe you survived something that was supposed to break you and it did not break you. Maybe you looked at who you were a year ago and recognized that you had become someone different, someone better, someone more capable of handling what life puts in front of you. What produced that feeling? Not the outcome by itself, the gap between where you were and where you ended up, the fact that it was hard and you did it anyway, the fact that you could have failed and you did not, the fact that you became something through the process that you were not at the start of it. That is what made it worth anything. Not success alone, success that required genuine effort in the face of genuine possibility of failure. Now remove the possibility of failure. Remove the difficulty. Remove the gap between where you are and where you could be. Remove the chance that things might not work out. Remove any situation where the outcome is not already guaranteed by the nature of what you are, rather than by what you do. What is left? Not much. Not anything that produces the feeling you just thought about. Not anything that requires anything from you, because nothing can go wrong that would require anything from you. Not any experience of growth, because you are already perfect. Not any skill development, because there are no skills to develop. Not any character building, because your character has been built into you rather than built by you. Heaven is described as a perfect state that you remain in permanently. You arrive perfect and you stay perfect. You cannot get better because there is no better to get to. You cannot develop because there is nothing to develop toward. You cannot overcome anything because there is nothing to overcome. Every challenge requires a gap between where you are and where you could be,
and heaven removes that gap entirely, and therefore removes the possibility of every challenge, and therefore removes the possibility of every experience that makes genuine life feel like anything worth having. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he called flow states, the moments when human beings are most fully alive and most fully engaged. And what he found consistently is that flow happens in a very specific zone. Not when things are easy, not when things are impossibly hard. In the narrow zone where the challenge is just beyond your current capacity, just enough beyond your reach to require everything from you without being so far beyond it that you give up. That zone produces the deepest form of human engagement and satisfaction that psychology has ever documented. Heaven eliminates that zone permanently. You are past it. You are beyond it. There is no just beyond your reach because there is no beyond. There is only what you are and what you have always been and what you will always be. Forever. Think about what happens to water when it stops moving, not for a day or a week, permanently. A river that stops flowing becomes a swamp. It does not become a beautiful, still lake. It becomes stagnant. It decays. It becomes the kind of environment that produces disease rather than life. The river was alive because of the movement. The moment the movement stopped, so did everything that made it a river. What remained looked like water, but it was no longer doing what water does. You in heaven will look like you, but you will no longer be doing what you do. What you do is move, struggle, grow, fail, try again, become. All of that will be gone, replaced by perfect, permanent stillness, dressed in gold and filled with the sound of worship.
Problem 5. You will not actually be you. Here is the question at the heart of the whole promise, and nobody wants to follow to its conclusion. Who exactly is going to be in heaven? Because Revelation says, no tears, no mourning, no crying, no pain. These things will not exist there, not in reduced form, not occasionally, not in small amounts. They will not exist. This is the architecture of the place. This is what the promise actually promises. Now think about your memories honestly, not the version you would share at a dinner party, the actual texture of your inner life, the full catalog. How much of it involves pain? How much involves regret? How much involves the specific grief of loss, the specific weight of mistakes, the specific ache of things that went wrong and people who are gone, and versions of yourself that you can no longer access? The memory of your father, inseparable from the grief of losing him. The memory of the relationship that ended badly, inseparable from how it felt when it ended. The memory of the thing you did that you cannot take back, inseparable from the shame of having done it. The memory of the person you used to be before something happened that changed everything, inseparable from the loss of who you were before. Every single one of those memories produces exactly the things that Revelation says will not exist in heaven. Tears, mourning, crying, pain. You cannot have those memories and not produce those responses. The memories and the feelings are not separate things. They are the same thing experienced from different angles. Which means you cannot have those memories in heaven. They're incompatible with the environment. And since the environment is guaranteed by Scripture, the memories must go. Now follow what this means all the way to the end. Your memories are not a neutral record of events that happened. They are the raw material of your identity. The specific person you are right now is the product of everything you've experienced and everything that experiencing it did to you. The losses that shaped you, the failures that taught you, the relationships that changed you, the moments of pain that forced you to become something more capable of handling pain. Take away the memories, and you do not have a lighter version of yourself. You have a different person entirely. A being that arrives in heaven claiming to be you is not you. It is a new creation. The Bible even uses this phrase, new creation, in 2 Corinthians 5. New. Not improved, not upgraded, new, a different thing, something that was made rather than grown, something that was designed rather than developed, something that does not carry the weight of the actual life because the weight has been removed along with everything else that was heavy. And the people you expect to be reunited with have been through the same process. Your mother is there, but she is the version of your mother with everything difficult removed.
the struggles she carried, the specific way she loved you through her own brokenness, the parts that were hard, the parts that were human, all gone, because all of it produced pain, and pain does not exist there. You will hold someone who looks like her, who might even have her voice, but the person who knew you in the specific way that only she knew you, who knew you through the specific texture of her specific life, that person has been replaced by a construction, a sanitized approximation, and you will not know the difference because the part of you that would know the difference has also been removed. This is not reunion, this is replacement, and the replacement is presented as the fulfillment of the promise, as what the love was always building toward, as the destination that makes the losing worth it. Problem 6. Heaven has a class system and nobody talks about it. The Bible is not subtle about this, it is explicit and specific. Matthew 6 verse 20, "Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." Different people store up different amounts, which means different people arrive with different amounts, which means there is a hierarchy in heaven, a class system built in from the beginning. 1 Corinthians 3 verse 12 to 15, "Each person's work will be shown for what it is. The day will bring it to light. If what has been built survives, the person will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the person will suffer loss, though the person will be saved even as escaping through the flames." There are winners and losers within the saved, people who receive rewards and people who suffer loss, both in heaven, both forever, with no indication that the gap closes over time. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 10, "We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad." A judgment, a receiving of what is due based on the earthly life, determined at death, fixed thereafter. So here is what this produces. Person A spends 80 years in faithful, devoted service, genuine, costly sacrifice, giving up things that mattered, living in a way that cost something. They arrive in heaven with significant accumulated treasure, high position, large mansion, substantial crown. Person B is a hardened criminal who hears the gospel for the first time at 79 in prison, believes genuinely on their deathbed, accepts Christ in their final weeks, arrives in heaven with almost nothing, lowest position, smallest portion, for eternity, with no mechanism for changing it. The books closed at death, the position fixed forever. This is not an edge case interpretation. This is the plain reading of the text, and the unfairness is obvious even before you apply the other constraints. But apply the other constraints, and something stranger emerges. In heaven, there is no sorrow. Person B in the lowest position cannot feel the loss of what they don't have. The capacity for that kind of grief has been removed. They experience their portion as exactly what they want, because their wanting has been adjusted to match their portion. They are content, genuinely content, by the design of their new nature. But if person B cannot feel the difference between their position and person A's position, then the reward system means nothing. It's a performance of fairness with no actual substance behind it. The crowns and mansions and treasures exist as theater, as decoration in a place where nobody can tell the difference between the expensive version and the cheap version, because the capacity to make the comparison has been removed from everyone inside it. The entire system of heavenly reward collapses under its own logic. Either people can feel the difference between more and less in heaven, which in case there is suffering in heaven, which contradicts Revelation, or people cannot feel the difference between more and less, in which case the reward system is meaningless. Both cannot be true simultaneously. Scripture insists on both simultaneously. And then there's the person who never heard, the person born into a community where the gospel never arrived, who lived their entire life without access to the specific information required to make the specific choice that determines their destination, who died having never had the opportunity that everyone else is being judged on. What happens to them? What tier do they get? Is the system saying that through no fault of their own, they simply don't make it? That the accident of their geography and their century determined their eternal destination as definitively as the most deliberate choice anyone ever made? If yes, then justice is not the word for it, And calling it just because God said so is not an argument, it's a surrender of the capacity to think clearly about what justice actually means.
Problem 7. The trade. The one that is happening right now in your actual life. Everything in this video has been about the destination, but the final problem is about the journey, about what the promise of heaven costs you before you get there, about the trade you are making right now with the only life you are certain of having. You have Problem 7. The trade. The one that is happening right now in your actual life. Everything in this video has been about the destination, but the final problem is about the journey, about what the promise of heaven costs you before you get there, about the trade you are making right now with the only life you are certain of having. You have one life. This is not a position or an argument, it is a fact. You are here. You are conscious. You are experiencing something. Years are passing. The only thing you can be completely certain of is that this is happening right now and that at some point it will end. Everything else is a belief. This is the one thing that requires no belief. It is simply what is. Heaven asks you to trade the certain thing for an uncertain thing, to give up the verified present for an unverified future, to structure your actual life around a destination that cannot be confirmed during the lifetime of the person being asked to live for it. And the trade is not small. The trade is not a minor inconvenience or a modest adjustment to otherwise unchanged life. The trade is specific and real, and it is happening in your life right now, whether you've named it or not. It is in the questions you are not asking, the doubts you are suppressing because following them feels like risking the only safety net you have, the conversations you are not having because having them honestly might lead somewhere that cannot be come back from, the relationships strained or broken because someone did not believe correctly, the experiences denied because they were incompatible with the requirements of the destination, the version of yourself that might exist if you were free to examine all of this honestly and decide what you actually think rather than what you've been told to think. Blaise Pascal made his famous wager: if God is real and you believe, you gain everything. If God is not real and you believe, you lose nothing. The wager seems rational because it treats the cost of belief as zero. But the cost is not zero. The cost is the life being lived right now, the years, the choices, the relationships, the questions, the freedom to think clearly about what you actually believe without the terror of hell managing the direction of the thinking. And even if the destination is real, even if the wager pays off and you arrive at heaven, look at what you arrive at. Look at what was on the other side of the trade the whole time. An eternity of compelled worship, no free will, no genuine identity, no growth, no challenge, no authentic reunion, a class system built on earthly circumstance, a permanent state of engineered contentment that has been designed to feel like satisfaction rather than one that satisfaction has been genuinely earned, a being that used to be you but now something new, something that was made to fit the environment rather than shaped by the experience of living. That is what the promise was always offering. That is what the trade was always for. And you are never given the full description before being asked to sign. The problem with heaven is not only that it might not exist. The problem with heaven is that even if it exists, it is not what you were told, and the life you gave for it was the only one you had, and you deserved to know what you were giving it for before you gave it. Not after, before, when there was still time to ask the questions, when the life was still ahead, when the knowing might have made a difference. There is a place this conversation continues, away from the algorithm, away from the pressure to make things comfortable enough for a platform that needs you manageable enough to keep watching, where the debates happen, where these arguments get challenged in real time, where the questions that get removed from public spaces get asked directly without someone softening them for an audience that was not asked if they wanted to be protected. If this landed somewhere real, if something in it named a question you've been carrying for a long time without permission to follow it, the link is in the description. It is the private room, and what happens there is nothing like what happens anywhere else. The next video goes somewhere most people are not ready to go.